Happy New Year, it is 2021, and gonna start things off a little differently this year because Friday, January 1st is, well, a Friday, and there weren't exactly a ton of movies coming out already. There aren't really new releases for today, so I'm gonna take the opportunity to talk about several films that you may not have had the chance to see either because they weren't available to you or because you might not have heard of them in 2020. So let's start off, of all things, with Tenet, which was Christopher Nolan's big old blockbuster film, and he pushed and pushed and pushed for this film to be in theaters. He wouldn't do a digital release after having finally seen it. I get why, because this movie makes no sense whatsoever, and if you are not forced to sit in your seat in a theater and have to pay attention, you are going to be underwhelmed by it, because it just feels like a bunch of action sequences strung together, and unless you're in that sort of immersive experience with explosions and music and all of that stuff, your attention is going to drift, because even in the plot of the film, and I actually think this is in the trailers, they say, don't try to understand it. And that to me is kind of insulting as an audience member, where you're like, I'm gonna make up this thing, but I'm gonna pretend it's so complicated and ask you to suspend your disbelief so much that I'm just gonna tell you not to understand it. Like, the hubris there, part of me admires the cockiness of that, and part of me is like, screw you, Christopher Nolan. So after having seen it, I finally get why, yes, this is why he wants you to see it in theaters, because he knew it would not hold up the second you were able to be distracted from it, or even had the opportunity to be distracted from it. Every character in this is so well informed as to what's going on. There is not a single moment where I feel like the characters are not going to come out okay, because they are all just walking around with such confidence, and that can work in a lot of movies. I feel like James Bond is a character in general who, he rarely displays insecureness, and yet there are times where he's clearly in over his head. Every single situation in this film, every character should have been in over their head, and yet they all just sort of walked around like, it's gonna be fine, I'm gonna figure it out. Again, I think that's a reflection of Christopher Nolan's sort of confidence in himself and him writing characters who reflect him. It's really hard to watch this action on a small screen. Like, I see what they were going with. I see where the appeal of seeing this on a big screen was. John David Washington is fine as the lead. This is actually my favorite role of Robert Pattinson's. I forget that he's British, and this is probably the most speaking he's had in a film that I've seen, at least, with his actual accent. I'm like, oh, you seem much less derp-y, actually. Elizabeth Debicki is fine. Kenneth Branagh, what a weird casting choice. They cast Kenneth Branagh as the bad guy in it. I don't think that's really a spoiler. And he does this terrible Russian accent. I'm like, why cast Kenneth Branagh, who is so British, just so utterly British as this character, and he doesn't even do a great job, so I'm like, just make the villain British. Find a way to do it. There's plot reasons that, but if you are so desperate and out of stuff to watch, I guess fine, you can put this on. It's very long, it's 2.5 hours, put it on in the background, but you either need to commit to paying attention and accepting the fact that it's gonna make no sense, and maybe if I rewatched it a couple of times, it might make a little bit more sense, but I don't feel inspired to watch it a couple more times. So you'll probably watch it when it comes to streaming, which I assume it eventually will because it's Warner Brothers and they have a partnership with HBO Max, so just wait for that. But when Tenet does finally roll around, temper your expectations aggressively. I think we all get very excited when Christopher Nolan films come out because they're a spectacle and he does think in a very distinct way, but when he's unwilling to share any of the thought process about that and just says, like, come along for the ride, I don't give a damn whether or not you get it, that's not inviting to me. So I personally am only gonna give it 2.8 out of 5. And then next up is Wolfwalkers, complete change of gears. It's available on Apple TV+. It's an animated film. It takes place in Ireland, and it's about this girl and her father who moved to a town, and her father is basically a hunter, and the town is sort of trying to expand into the forest, and there are these creatures called Wolfwalkers who reside in the forest who are protecting it. It's a very, I think, nature-forward film. Sean Bean stars as the voice of the father. Honor Nifsi is the voice of Robin the girl. Eva Whittaker is Mebh, who is of the forest. It's from the people who did The Secret of Kells, so it's a very distinct animation style, and I think it's very different from a lot of the feature animated films. It's 2D, first of all, or it looks hand-drawn. It actually reminds me a little bit more of something like in the US that you would associate with like a Cartoon Network, which is not a bad thing. It's just something that's a little bit different that I think we are used to seeing for feature films. And I've said recently, or I've reminded folks recently, that animated films are just films. Oftentimes they are just aimed at an audience that is inclusive of all age ranges, which includes children. And so that of course guides the type of content and what you can sort of cover in it. And therefore a lot of people associate them with being children's movies. But I think take a look at something like Soul. That's not a kid's movie. That is just a movie that is friendly towards kids. However, Wolfwalkers, I do feel like, is maybe aimed at a slightly younger audience in some ways in terms of some of the appeal. I think having a young girl, or two young girls actually, as the leads, it can get a little, if you have children, you're probably very used to it and how high-pitched and how energetic it can be. But as someone who does not, and was just watching this film, it was a little overwhelming at times, and I kind of wish they maybe had toned it down a little bit. This film got really kind of overhyped for me. Everyone is saying it's the best animated film of the year, and I think it's a beautiful film. I think it's well done. There are some very bizarre plot lines involving, I want to say, like the church. I think there's a whole sort of metaphor about environmental protection that they're obviously trying to make, but I think that would be very lost on children. It's a beautiful film. It's good. I just think I would also suggest you temper your expectations, and if you are an adult who is watching this who does not have children, be aware that it is going to skew even more friendly, I think, to a younger audience, and so you might not find it as enjoyable as something like, I think, Soul, where there's a ton of stuff that you would appreciate much more if you're an adult. But still, it's a beautiful film, very enjoyable. I don't think there's a particular reason not to watch it, and especially if you have kids, I think this is a great one to watch. I am going to give it 4 out of 5. And then the next one is Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which is streaming on HBO Max at this point, and this is a very tough one to, I think, recommend, but it's a good film, which is challenging. I was looking at the Rotten Tomatoes. Again, I've talked so much about how Rotten Tomatoes are not a great indicator of things, but I was interested to see what an audience, a wider audience versus a critic audience reaction to it was, and it's very, very split. The critics give it 99%, the audience give it 20%. And I can sort of understand why. This is not a film for a broader audience. This is a very challenging film. The thing is, I don't think it should be challenging. So it's from director and screenwriter Eliza Hittman, who did a film in 2017 that I appreciated a lot, but it was another tough one to watch for me, called Beach Rats, and that was about a high schooler sort of dealing with his sexuality. He's gay, and the bullying, and all sorts of relationships. And I think what Eliza Hittman does really, really well is these films feel very in the moment. Like, they are not overly produced in the sense that I didn't notice it until I would say like 20 or 30 minutes in, but I was like, oh, I don't think there's a music or a score to this. It's all diegetic sound. It's very, very mixed to feel real. And so then, because of the subject of Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, that can be a pretty painful thing. It stars Sydney Flanagan as a girl who lives in Pennsylvania, and she is facing an unintended pregnancy, and in Pennsylvania, you cannot get an abortion without parental consent, and so she and her cousin go up to New York City to deal with the situation. And look, it's tough and it's unrelenting, and I think it is very honest, and what I really, really appreciated about it is that it did not sensationalize the process of abortion. I think that's something that, like, we need to normalize, right? Like, there shouldn't be shame involved. It doesn't need to be this hugely traumatic experience. The procedure itself is so safe and so just, it's just a medical procedure. I think that is something that's probably really challenging for a lot of audiences to have to face, and so you have to be open-minded when you go into this film, and if you didn't have any warning, this would knock you on your feet. And so I appreciated watching it. It's really hard to watch. It's not trying to sugarcoat anything. As someone who lived in New York, there were a lot of moments I was like, yeah, there is like a sense, it captures a sense of sort of the wonder and the oddness of this city, which I don't think is even the intention of the story. It just happens to accurately capture that, which is something I appreciated, right? I think Eliza Hittman also just does a really good job in dealing with these sort of teenage, on the cusp of adulthood stories that are really, really tough to deal with. And I give her credit for the scope of stories that she has been able to tell so far set in that parameter. I would be interested to see what she would do about stories about, let's say, just like fully grown adults or something like that. But it's a tough one. I think it could be cathartic for a lot of people to watch, but I also acknowledge that it could be triggering for a lot of people to watch. So take that under consideration. But I think if you are open to it, it could be an enlightening experience. It's a really well acted and well done piece of filmmaking. So I'm also going to give this 4 out of 5. And then finally, I have the 40-year-old version on Netflix, and yes, version, not virgin, which is something I've had to struggle to say. It's written and directed by Rada Blank. She is a filmmaker, writer, and actress. She also stars in it. She started as a playwright, and so this film feels very autobiographical for her. It's about a playwright dealing with being about to turn 40, and she's sort of stalled in her career, and she's teaching, and then she finds herself drawing inspiration from rapping. And so she becomes a rapper. And not in the sense of, she blows up viral on YouTube or something like that and, gets a record contract. No, she just sort of starts to express her art instead of through playwriting, through rhymes. And there are parts of this movie that I loved. I think her sort of inner monologue is great. It's shot in black and white. I'm not 100% sure why. It's a choice, but it made me feel like I was back in film school. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think it sets a tone. It says like, hey, I'm this type of movie. There are parts I like her character a lot. She is no nonsense. She is confident, but also insecure, which is something Tenet could have used more of a balance of. She says the things that I wish I could say with confidence, but I think where the film, for me at least, again, it got really overhyped, I think is part of the problem for me. So I do want, again, all of these films are about tempering your expectations. I think it got a little lost for me in the actual rap parts of it because, I appreciated it. I appreciated her flows. I think they're very poetic. I think that was part of the problem in that. And maybe, I know there are rappers who are able to just freestyle in such an amazing way, but it felt so polished in those moments that it took me out of it a little bit. But overall, I think it's an enjoyable film, again, because it is on Netflix and is just available to you. There aren't a ton of reasons not to watch it. But I would say that it's not going to be sort of grand sweeping film, and it does not really follow sort of a stereotypical formula that you would expect to see in a film, which is a good thing, right? Like, we should have more narrative diversity in terms of how we see, not older, but old, not young women portrayed on screen. We should have more diversity in the storylines we see of women of color portrayed on screen. So in those senses, it's very, very successful. I just think it splits a lot of time between the worlds of playwriting and rapping. And that flow for me personally took me out of it a little bit sometimes. But still a great film. I'm going to give it 3.9 out of 5.